Today we're going to talk about replacement parts for your Eufy E10 S1 S1 Pro pumps. How often do you need to change them and how to tell what's going to be right for you? So most pump parts are considered consumables. The only part of the pump that is considered not a consumable or not something you need to replace regularly is the motor. Now motors don't last forever. They do have a finite motor life. Typically it's several hundred hours, so quite a lot of pumping. But everything else on your pump, so the containers, the flanges, your duckbills, your diaphragms, these all need to be replaced, but they all need to be replaced on slightly different schedules. So let's talk about what that's going to look like. So your most commonly replaced part is going to be your duckbill. And Eufy does have a great graphic in their app where they break it down between if you're expressing 1 to 3 times a day or if you're expressing 3 times or more a day. And they tell you the duckbills need to be replaced every month if you're expressing more than 3 times a day and every 2 to 3 months if it's 1 to 3 times a day. What I will tell you is that for the most part, most moms are going to need to replace duckbills every 2 to 6 weeks. Some are going to get a little bit longer life, but on average, what I see with my clients is that these little teeny tiny clear duckbills on a multitude of pumps, they'll last 2 weeks if you're putting them in a sterilizer. They'll last closer to 6 weeks if you are hand washing them and you're using them infrequently. But these are responsible, despite the fact that they are a very tiny part, they're a very fragile part, they're responsible for generating your suction. This part needs to be able to close fully with suction and to open to allow the milk to pass. If it gets torn, if it gets worn, then it's not able to close as much. It's not able to generate the same amount of suction that hurts your milk supply. So I get where they're going, but I don't think I see a lot of duckbills last 2 to 3 months. You would have to be pumping once a day, a handful of times a week. And most of my clients are pumping more often. They're pumping at least every day. So I'm going to recommend a little bit more often. And then we're going to look at your diaphragms. Diaphragms last a little bit longer. They're going to last twice as long as a duckbill on average. So if you're needing to replace these every 6 weeks, you need to replace these every 12 weeks. So whatever your duckbill schedule is, consider twice as often for the diaphragms. Now they tell you if you're pumping less than the 3 times a day, it's every 3 months. And if you're pumping a couple times a day, it's going to be every 2 to 3 months. I'm going to say the average is about 2 to 3 months. These do not need to be replaced as often as duckbills. Now, for my heavy use moms who love their sterilizers, they love their dishwashers, you could be replacing these as much as every month. Now, these parts are available in generic parts off of Amazon. I don't think that there's an issue using the generic duckbills, but the generic diaphragms, I've ordered 3 different packs of them sold by different companies, and what I'll tell you is that they're all different. What is happening is that the S32, which is the kind of the base shape of the Eufy pump, is a fairly generic shape. It's available from lots of different brands. There's nothing wrong with that. The S32 body is amazing and it's one of our best wearable options out there. But the different diaphragms are modified for different pumps. So like the Artomelia has a diaphragm that is extremely thin and it's not working with other S32 parts. This one is not that same clear silicone. If you actually feel this, it's a very silky, stiff silicone. So I don't recommend using generic diaphragms with this pump. I don't think it's going to work performance-wise. I do think when I put it on the suction gauge, I'm getting up to a 20 to 25% suction loss. And then one random brand of them had 2 of the 4 in the pack that caused the suction to elevate. The other 2 dropped it. No idea why. So with the clear ones, I'm going to say for now, if you've invested in a Eufy pump, maybe don't mess yourself up like that. Like it's just not the little bit amount of money you're going to spend on the brand name part is going to be better for your pump, better for your situation. So that's how often you need to do these. Now, these clear plastic bodies, telling people, sorry, I'm throwing stuff today. Telling people that they need to replace these tends to get moms really upset because they're like, why? I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm going to say I don't think these need to be replaced nearly as often as companies tell us to. I think these last closer to 4 to 6 months routinely, unless you're putting it in a dishwasher or sterilizer. Where the S1 Pro could be or the S1 Pro could be the difference is that it has this opening up here, which is a vulnerability. So it does increase the flex. Like the top of this is more flexible than this solid piece of plastic is. What this means is if you're sticking this in a sterilizer, if you're sticking this in the dishwasher and it's getting heat, if it gets any pressure against it, that's going to warp. That's going to increase the chances that you're going to have issues with your heat sensor not working, it's going to increase the chances of leaking at the top of the pump. So this probably is going to need to be placed more often. This body it's a generic. We see lots of versions like this, and we're not seeing it wear prematurely. So I wouldn't really stress about that. If you start to notice your flanges don't want to go on right, if you start to see your flanges are wearing out more often, then I would start to suspect that these parts are warped and need to be replaced. If you notice that your duckbill doesn't want to stay in position while you're pumping, it's probably warped. And if you start to notice that your motor is not sitting correctly here, even with fresh diaphragms, this is probably warped and needs to be replaced. Most of these are going to get replaced because of damage. I'm a firm believer in hand washing my wearable pump parts, so I would say I could easily get 6 months, if not more, out of these bodies. It will probably need to be replaced more often because it gets scratched up by sponges and wear. And once you start to see scratches on plastic, you want to go ahead and replace it because those little scratches can hold biofilm, which is bad for your baby feeding parts. But these are pretty durable. I don't really worry about those. Now, flanges are a part that kind of confuses people. These flanges are probably going to be more prone to needing to be replaced. They tell you that the flanges need to be replaced every 3 to 4 months if you are pumping more than 3 times a day, and then every 5 to 6 months if you're not pumping. I am actually seeing that they are cracking if they've been in a sterilizer and that they're needing to be replaced a little bit closer to every 3 to 4 months, no matter how many times a day you're pumping, because it seems to have to do with if you're using the fridge hack, if you're using a dishwasher, if you're using a sterilizer, the extreme changes in temperature can cause this area right here to start to fail. If you're hand washing it, I don't know if anybody who's had one be hand washed and fail yet, but this is also a relatively new pump. It does have that heating element in it, and I do think, again, just the temperature changes of the heating element, I would replace these every couple months. They are on the more expensive side, so I actually recommend, even if something says it's approved for a sterilizer, approved for a dishwasher, every time you do that, you're decreasing the lifespan of the pump parts. It can be really expensive to pump. If you don't believe me, we have a wearable parts pump calculator that I will link down below that is also available in our on-demand all-access program, but you can actually enter how often you pump, how many sets of parts you have in rotation, how long your pump sessions are, and how you wash them, and we can give you a fairly accurate estimate based on our experience with thousands of pumping moms on how long these parts are lasting. Your pump habits and my pump habits are going to be very, very different, and what that means is that how often I need to replace it and how often you need to replace it and how often a manufacturer says you need to replace it may be 3 different numbers. And given that these parts actually play a large role in your success, I don't like to leave things to chance. So you know how you want to pump. You know how often you need to pump. Use the calculator. Make sure that you're keeping your parts in good order. And then if you're using the E10, the big difference is it's a different flange. The bodies are going to need to be replaced on the same schedule. This thin, clear silicone, these tend to be pretty durable. I think these need to be replaced actually closer to every like 6 to 9 months. I'm not seeing a lot of issues with that. Now, on the calculator, we do talk about how often our inserts replaced. So let me grab the Eufy inserts. But inserts, for the most part, they won't last forever. Most women actually change sizes. You're at your biggest after you first have a baby, and you get progressively smaller with time. The further postpartum you are, the more your hormones have settled, your nipples will get smaller. So most people are not going to actually wear out an insert. They're going to change sizes before they need to do it. But if you're somebody who, we do have some moms that like rapidly shift in the beginning and then are very stable the entire time, you're still going to want to replace these every like 6 to 9 months, just because the silicone does start to wear. And again, anything that starts to wear could start to have pieces break off. It could start to have cracking in it that holds biofilm. So, just keep an eye on your inserts. If they start to feel different, like this one is fairly firm. If all of a sudden you were to pick it up and it was to squish more like this, which is really squishy, so you can see there's a clear difference. This has some give, or this has some, flex to it. This has like nothing, no resistance. If all of a sudden your inserts feel different, go ahead and replace them, and recheck your flange sizing, make sure everything is good. So in terms of replacement parts, manufacturers absolutely give you a schedule. Treat that as the go no longer then. Don't treat that as it's not possible, I could need to replace it sooner. Sometimes you do need to replace it sooner, and given how much is riding on your pumping success, especially if you're using a wearable and you're accepting that kind of inefficiency in your pumping routine, we don't want to add more inefficiency by not taking care of our pumps. So hopefully that helps, and happy pumping.